Audits, what do? Let's talk about this. They're not as bad as you think. There are fewer face-to-face audits because of the IRS budget cuts. Why did the IRS get its budget cut? Congress still has a little bit of power in spite of King Barack passing laws without their assistance. See, the Constitution has curious language. Congress shall make the laws. We seem to have forgotten that part. What happened was when the IRS did the targeting of the conservatives, the Congress asked questions, IRS refused to answer them. So Congress said, well, all we can do is cut your funding to teach you a lesson. So they did. They deserve it. I have no pity, no sympathy, none. That's an out-of-control bureaucracy. As a result of the budget cuts, there are fewer audits, which is, in the main, I think it's good, because I don't really care for that whole system. And granted, I make money on it. What triggers audits? First of all, forms not matching. If you get a 1099 and it's not right, you need to do one of two things. You need to report it, the full 1099 amount, and then deduct it somewhere else, or you need to get the 1099 corrected. If things don't match, if the W-2 that you got doesn't match what's on the return, a big one's 1098s, loan statements. If that doesn't match what you put on the return, there's going to be an issue. Other reasons, expenses are too high in a given category. We don't know what the too high number is. But for example, you're a flipper, you make $100,000 a year, and you write off 50 grand a year in meals and entertainment. That sounds kind of high. You're not a restaurant critic, right? That sounds kind of high. But we don't know exactly what those thresholds are. We just know that if certain expenses are too high. Now, sometimes expenses, there's a judgment call to where you put them. So for example, if you have a really high repair expense on a rental, that could make an audit more likely. So what's one way to ameliorate that without lying? We don't want to be dishonest, right? Maybe some of that's maintenance. Take a look at the invoices. Was some of it lawn cutting? Was some of it just painting? Maybe because there's a separate category, cleaning and maintenance. So to keep your repair expense from being too high, could we shift some? That's one way to do it. What else causes audits? Losses, too many years in a row, although they tend to understand that with rentals that happens because of depreciation. The strangest rental audit I had was one where a client got audited, and I said, why did you audit her? She only has 4 rentals and doesn't make a ton of income. And they said, well, the first year she didn't show any rental income. And that seemed odd to us. I said, did you look and see when she bought the rentals? No. December. Audit ended immediately. I mean, they just looked at it briefly and, we're good. Once they understood why. So it always pays to ask why. I do like, there is one, I don't want to overcomplicate entities, but if you have separate businesses, there is a benefit. I remember I mentioned before, I've got the law practice, the book sales, and the real estate. What do I like about that? Each one of them buys a box of cigars. And if they audit one company, did they get the other 2? Probably not. The cigars I think are legit. Bottom line is if they knock it out, I still got some elsewhere. The audit rates are lower on entities than on your personal. Schedule C in particular is highly audited. LLCs taxed as partnerships, S corporations, or C corporations are audited with much less frequency than Schedule C, especially if it's a high earning Schedule C. What do you do if you get an audit? There are different kinds of audits. The first thing you do, take a lewd, be very calm, it's all good. If you think you did something criminal, you need a specific type of lawyer. I don't do criminal cases. That's so specialized for tax law. That's the kind of guy you need. You don't talk to anybody. People, if you've done something criminal, and I'm not condoning it, I'm just telling you what you do, or if you're accused of it, because a lot of people get railroaded. 10 years ago, if you said, John, if you committed a crime, would you be open with the FBI investigator? I'd say, yeah. I still had trust. I don't anymore. I think you're insane if you trust those people. For them, it's about careerism. They want to convict you to get a raise. And if they ruin your life, they don't care. Now, there are still some honest ones left, but there are enough dishonest ones that you cannot be trusting of these people. So if you're ever approached for anything possibly criminal, you don't say anything except that. Now there's a case that says you have to affirmatively. You can't just be silent. You have to tell them, I'm being silent. You need to talk to my lawyer. I hope none of you find yourselves in that position. Unfortunately, it's becoming more common. What do you have to do to commit a tax crime versus just owe them money?
Lie.
Thank you. Lie. What does that mean? You don't report income you got, and it has to be intentional. I mean, if it was an honest, truly an honest mistake, that's one thing. But if you knew, or you create deductions that don't exist, those are the two things that get you put into prison. Don't do that. It's not worth it. I would rather not make money than make money and lie about it. And that is, by the way, what's happening for you Ayn Rand fans. You know, a lot of people are starting to go galt, and they've never read the book, they don't know what that means. It's just that when the government makes it hard to do business and takes half your money if you do make money, a lot of people say, you know what, I'm going to the beach, sayonara. Now let's assume you have a normal audit. You get a letter in the mail. The first question is it person to person or is it just through the mail? More and more of them are through the mail. More and more. Why the budgets? Calm. It's just money, first of all. It's just money. If you did things the right way, you're going to be fine. They might nickel and dime you here and there. It depends on the type of agent we'll get. We'll talk about that. If you did things wrong, you may even have a chance to repair it. Oftentimes, I can get you a lot of time with an IRS agent to come up with records to prove things if you don't have them. And then, of course, you always have the decision of, is it easier to just pay the tax? What's your time worth? What's the stress worth? It depends on the size. So the first thing is calm. The IRS is one of the few bureaucracies that does have some accountability. Why? Tax court. There's a specialized court of very knowledgeable judges that know the bureaucracy and know the rules inside and out. We need that for all the other bureaucracies. There should be an EPA court. There should be a Department of Labor court, etc. There should be an OSHA court. Because those judges hold those people accountable. So you get a letter, don't procrastinate. The clock is started. The date on the letter is not absolute. We can often move at 60, 90, sometimes more time. It just depends on the situation. What kind of agent did we get? How significant and serious is the situation? How much records do they need? But don't procrastinate. Don't put it aside. Get it started immediately. So what happens when an audit says you owe a lot of money? This is very, very, very important if you ever run into this situation. The IRS issues a special letter called a Notice of Deficiency. We just call it an NOD in the industry. You must not ever miss that letter. That letter has a 90-day period to get you in the tax court, and it's stamped on the upper right-hand corner of the first or second page. That is a ticket. The tax court is great because you don't have to pay the tax to go there. In other words, you say, I don't agree with this. You file in tax court. The filing fee is $60. The real fee is me. And some of the stuff I do it so much that I've got templates. It's not that hard to do. The NOD, you cannot miss it. It comes certified. The day you get it, you freaking put it in you scan it, you put it in Dropbox, you talk to me. We can't miss the deadline. If you miss the deadline by 5 minutes, you lose. Now the only way you can go to court is pay all the tax and sue in federal district court. So you got to pay the tax and the penalties, sue for a refund, and district court is more complex than tax court. Plus the judges are very, you don't know what they're going to do. They don't understand the tax law. Sometimes it hurts you, sometimes it helps you. They can be very random. They don't really understand the code the way the tax court judges do. You really want to go to tax court if you can. So what happens when we file in tax court? We then get assigned to an appeals agent. And this is important. There are two ways to get an appeals agent. Once you lose the audit, you file a protest or you go to tax court. Here's my experience when we file a protest. We wait forever, sometimes years, to get an appeal. And the agent is not motivated. Now the appeals agents are cut above the lower agents. The lower agents are not as well educated, not as sharp. The appeals agents have experience and more training. And if it's an appeals agent who knows there's a tax court case pending, they have been trained to settle. They have been trained to settle. The IRS can growl all at once. Ah! I love the game. I call the game, me Tarzan, you Jane. You know, they try to tell you how tough they are, and we have 1,000 lawyers. Okay, there are 300 million of us. Good luck. Those guys are so busy, they can't try every case. They just can't. So the appeals agents, if it's not through a protest but through tax court, have an incentive to settle, and that's what they're trained to do. I get way better settlements. And the settlement gets better the closer we get to the court date. A lot of the time I don't see the IRS lawyers until we're right before the date. And I'll give you some examples in a minute. The bottom line is the client is usually not involved other than providing me records, being very, very careful that everything's accurate. We don't want to see anything false. I have, unfortunately, and this is embarrassing in its way to admit, I've never been through a full tax court trial because they always settle with me. And the settlement was good enough, I told my client, you really should take this, this is good. And it's frustrating because I really want to go all the way.